Welcome to the Lemons and Pineapples podcast, the self-development podcast for women who want more. I'm your host, Emma O'Brien. I'm a no-nonsense life coach, a seasoned entrepreneur, photographer, rescue dog mum, and women's empowerment champion. Each week, I share self-development strategies, amazing guest interviews, and uplifting conversations that will help you up-level all areas of your life. Let's dive in. Hi, folks. Welcome to Season 2, Episode 3 of the podcast. Today, my guest is Anna Zannides, and we're talking about how to get comfortable with being alone. If you're recently divorced and you found yourself single, or you're currently single and you don't really want to be, this episode is for you. First, a bit about my guest. Anna is a breakup and divorce coach with a background in education. Following her divorce and redundancy, she retrained to teach mindfulness and spent several years working with people living with cancer. It was her time in Nepal working with street children that inspired her to follow a Buddhist path. Last year, Anna published her first book, How Did I Get Here?, focusing on human behavior and breaking free from human conditioning. All her work is firmly rooted in the need for compassion, particularly self-compassion, and she now helps people evaluate their lives and make more conscious choices about their futures. Welcome to the podcast, Anna.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
You have had quite the journey to get to where you are today, so I'm excited for our conversation here. And of course, we're tackling a topic today that I think is almost a bit taboo, and it's quite a difficult topic for people, and that is how to be okay with being on your own. So kick us off by sharing why, as humans, we find it so hard to be on our own.
Well, I think we are almost conditioned to think that we must always be with others. I think there is a huge part of our growing up and our society which teaches us, and I think I write it in my book as well, these kind of fairy tales, especially the fairy tales where we end up with the prince and the queen and the princess, and that's the endings and that's the ideal way. That's one of them. I think one of them is the conditioning, and it's the idea. But the second one is that we're never taught the importance of getting to know ourselves and being comfortable with ourselves. Our whole system, our whole education system is always focused on that external world. Create your job and create your career path and get this big house and all of that. But if we look at psychology even and Maslow's theory of the real happiness, the thing that he identified as being real happiness is self-actualization. But self-actualization doesn't come from outside, it comes from the internal world. So being on our own means that we end up having to really explore ourselves and who we are. And that's difficult for a lot of people.
Yeah, I agree with you. I was just thinking as you were talking, Disney has an awful lot to answer for, especially for, all jokes aside, for little girls with all of the fairy tales. I think the Disney movies are changing a bit. My daughter is now 20, so I haven't watched a Disney movie in a long time. But if I think of what I watched growing up, you're right. We're sold the myth of the fairy tale of the prince coming to rescue you and having a man who worships the ground you walk on. And that isn't a reality. We're in relationship with somebody else as another human with all of our foibles. And I don't know that we're taught to accurately navigate that. And one of the things I have found from my own experience of coming out of a marriage and then jumping straight into another relationship, because, why not? I think a lot of people do that until they realize it's a really big mistake to make. A lot of people keep doing it. I mean, I know it's part of the work you do is helping people get past a breakup and break the pattern that they might be in of being in the same relationship over and over, or you know, one that comes in different outfits. And it is difficult being alone. I found it hard. I think when I had been very lonely in the relationships I'd been in, I craved the right relationship with somebody, if that makes sense. And I think with that craving ended up in a lot of wrong relationships. And it wasn't until I'd got to the point of really doing some work on myself and thinking, actually, I need to be okay with just being me. And that's hard. I think that's the point a lot of people struggle. And it's why people end up stuck in dysfunctional relationships, why people can't be alone, because it's actually hard being alone with yourself.
Yeah. And I think what people don't realize is that the dynamics in society is changing, with over half of the adult population living in single households. And that is something which is causing so much emotional and mental health issues, because people see being alone as being lonely, being alone as being a failure, but many of us who have come to that point of, you know, loving our life as a single person, what we've done, or what I've done, let's say, is one, I find myself good company. I am good company. Two is that I live a life where freedom is at the center of everything I do. And being on my own or being alone is part of that desire, very strong desire for my own freedom. Freedom to do, think, say, and choose every minute of my day what I am doing, without having to consider someone else. Now, I was married for 30 years, so that wasn't, and I'm not saying it was an awful marriage, and it wasn't an awful marriage either. But coming out of it, I have definitely seen and it's taken work. You know, I did the same as you. I went into a relationship shortly after my divorce, and I had other, you know, people that I had met on the way, and it was actually a friend of mine who is a monk came to stay with me, and I spoke to him and I said, you know, okay, gosh, you know, there's this thing that I need to find somebody. And he turned around and he looked at me and he says, well, what you need is to not want it. And I thought, oh, okay. And I worked very, very hard to get to that point of not wanting to be in a relationship.
Yeah, and that's an interesting thing. So I have two questions for you. And the first one is, you've touched on self-acceptance a few times, and I've touched on it. And my journey of self-acceptance has been being partly self-reliant, and I think I veer towards kind of being overly independent, which is not the best thing in the world either. So that's, you know, there's been a bit of a journey with that. But it's been, like you've said, being okay with being alone, but not feeling lonely, not craving the company of somebody else because you can't be on your own. So just talk a little bit about your view on self-acceptance. And I mean, that's our whole journey. It's a lifetime's journey, really, of self-acceptance. But what are the first few steps that someone can take if they're listening to this and thinking, you know what, I'd really love to not want to be in a relationship with someone, but I desperately do? Talk about that self-acceptance a little bit.
Yeah, I think what's really important is to begin to actually like yourself. And I've spoken to people, I've been around addiction for many years because my father was an addict and it's in my family quite strongly. And that's one of the things that I notice with people is they don't like themselves. You can't mistreat yourself if you like yourself. That's the difference. And when we talk about self-compassion and self-kindness in Buddhism and in mindfulness, from the compassion-based mindfulness that I've trained in, it's really about reaching that place of liking yourself, being at peace with yourself, because when you're doing that, you're kinder to everybody else. You're more compassionate to everybody else. Only angry people hurt other people. Only people that don't like themselves hurt other people. How do we do this? We do this by, one, self-forgiveness. We forgive ourselves for the things we've not done necessarily very well. The times where we've let down others, the times where we've let ourselves down, the times where we may not have been as kind to somebody else or whatever else it might be. And we forgive ourselves because the truth is, there is nobody that's going to get through this life without hurting someone else, without letting somebody else down, without being sometimes not very good, sometimes not very nice. We need to accept all those things, but also from the perspective that that is what being a human is.
Yeah, that we're flawed. We're all flawed, and I think that's it. And what I hear in here, and it's just a really, I just had a light bulb moment with it, is we have to learn to self-validate so that we don't constantly seek to be in relationship with other people to make us feel okay. And I think that's partly what fueled my serial relationship need. Was I need somebody to love me. I need to be externally loved, because actually it was a time where I wasn't able to, I don't think I was able to fully love myself. And it sounds like such a cliche, but I think it's so true. And how many people go through life doing this, of seeking the person who's going to make them feel whole? I hate that phrase, I'll find my other half. No, 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 no. You have to be the whole person, and you have to, as a whole person, in my humble opinion, be a whole person going into relationship with another whole person. Otherwise, you're two broken people coming together and expecting the other one to fix you, which is just, I think, a recipe for dysfunction.
Well, I mean, that's part of the conditioning, because if we look at um, the way that we're brought up and the idea of that the stories that we're told, even from the Christian perspective, that, we have Adam, we have Eve, and therefore that's what we need. But if we I don't want to go into that too much because that is going to be very controversial. But if we take away the idea that we're not whole, and also think about love as something bigger than just me and you. Love isn't just between me and one person. Love is a whole way of being, love is about loving life, loving others, being compassionate regardless of who that person is. Love is the way you are. And in actual fact, and this is really important for me, the way to fix society is that we all learn to love. Love is the biggest and the most dangerous weapon. It really is. Because if we all stopped the hate and the anger, and we all started coming from a place of love, just imagine the peace in this world. And that's what, whoever is running the show doesn't want us to see. That's what division is about. That's why get into a relationship so you're in this little nuclear bubble and the world is okay, but the world isn't okay. Okay. So for me, it's really a much bigger picture than just being in a couple. That's the way I see it. And I also think we're very distorted in our view about relationships. You know, people will be, I've had conversations with people saying to me, oh yeah, but what do you do about sex? Well, I say, well, how many people in relationships and in long-term relationships are actually having sex? Let's be honest here. If
Yeah.
we're going to have this discussion, don't come tell me that after 10 years of marriage or 5 years or 20 years or whatever, that you're hot for each other every single night, because that's a lie.
Yeah.
Okay. So if it's sex that you're looking for, believe me, as a single person, you can get it every single night.
Yeah.
Okay. With a different person. So if that's your incentive to be in a relationship, then don't tell me it's about love, because it
Mm-hmm.
isn't.
Mm-mm.
Yeah. And relationships often are just a convenience.
Yeah.
And if you're a lonely person and you want to get into a relationship, again, it's about convenience. It's not about love. That's
No.
the
Yeah. And I think when it becomes you're in a relationship because you're lonely and it's just any relationship and it's crap fundamentally, the work is why what am I seeking outside of myself and how do I find it within myself? I think there's a whole other discussion, which is not really what we're addressing today, in the convenience of relationships because of money. Because I think often being a single person, it's difficult to fund everything yourself. And I think a lot of people end up in a relationship for financial convenience, which is I think that's a difficult one to cover. But if we come back to our topic of thinking about how does one get to being okay being on your own, so if there's somebody listening who has recently had a marriage that's gone south, or or there's been a bereavement, what are the first steps for somebody of working through to getting to the point of being okay, take finances and everything else aside, how does someone start to work towards getting to a place of being really peaceful and at ease being on their own, and being peaceful and at ease with the possibility that they might never meet somebody?
Yeah. So two things to answer. First, I'll start with the very simple one, which is you can never say I will never meet anyone, because you just don't know what's around the corner.
Absolutely.
Okay. So when I say that I am happy single and I'm happy with my life and whatever, that doesn't mean that I'm going, if I met somebody, I'll be no, because that's not the way that it is. It's fine to be alone. It's actually good to be alone. I'm happy I'm alone, but I could meet someone tomorrow and go, oh, wow, this is interesting. So it's not about closing yourself off and going, well, I'm done, because that's another bitterness that you haven't actually dealt with.
Yep.
So that's the first thing. And then the other thing is, the only way to find peace with all of this is to actually sit with the things that are not peaceful. When you're pushing away the thing that is causing you trouble, the thing that is difficult, when you're going, I don't want it, yeah, it's like you are stirring up the thing that is causing you problems. Just leave it, let it be, is what it is. Yeah. It's so I feel upset right now, I feel lonely right now. Okay, that's fine. I recognize that. I can sit with that, because what people don't know, or don't become aware of, is that emotions are fleeting. If we really pay attention to our feelings and our emotions, we'll know how many hundreds do we have in a day.
Yep.
Yeah. They're not concrete. They're not there all the time.
Mm-mm.
You know, you just have to allow and not push them away, not stir them. And that's where mindfulness comes in, where we are aware of that moment and we don't let it pull us along.
Yeah.
So that's where we start. We start by going, okay, this is how I am right now, but this is just how I am right now. It isn't everything, it isn't the big picture. So I'll just let it go. And
Yeah.
it might just be that we distract ourselves for a little while. I need to go and have a bath. I need to go out for a walk. I pick up the phone and call a friend.
Mm-hmm.
In my case, if I feel like that a lot of times, what I'll do is I'll go down to see my granddaughters and they see me and they're so used to me now at 9 years old. They look at me and they go, we know what you want. And they'll give me a great big cuddle. And I'm like, cool, that's better than drugs, right? So, do the thing that makes you feel good.
Mm.
And that changes the emotion.
Yeah. I think that's such powerful advice. There is learning to sit with the discomfort and knowing that it'll pass, because I think that is look, it's a big part of drivers of all sorts of human behavior that actually is unhelpful. It keeps people in dysfunctional relationships. It keeps people being addicts, whether that's alcohol. Work addiction, I think, is such an interesting one, because I look at people who are workaholics, and I'm sort of married to one, and I just think, what is it you're avoiding with this behavior that's actually self-destructive? But I think big emotions, when you initially start to invite them in, physically they're really uncomfortable. They're really, really uncomfortable, and they can be overwhelming. And it's learning to sit and say, I'm going to sit and I'm going to be overwhelmed by this, and I'm going to trust that if I allow it up, I'm allowing it out. And that takes great courage to be able to do that.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's interesting because before my divorce, I had quite a high profile, very busy career, traveling the country. I was up and down everywhere. And sometimes I'd be out the house at 7 in the morning, 6:30 in the morning, and sometimes it'll be an overnight stay if I was out of London. And I remember getting on the train. I do write about this in my book. And I remember getting on the train once and looking out the window, going to work, thinking, I felt this freedom in me and my work was, my escape.
Mm-hmm.
And then on the way home in the evening or the next day, this dread that I would have to go back. And I love my children and I do anything and I'm very close to them, but there was something not right that I didn't want to see. And although my ex-husband would be waiting for me at the train station, poor thing, with his, I'm here to pick you up, I was kind of like, well, I don't want you to be here, but I would never say it.
Yeah.
Right. So there was something in me that clearly didn't want to be in the marriage anymore, but didn't have the courage to say it. So the work was definitely an escape for me.
Yeah.
And I would have probably taken on even more had I not ended up getting made redundant and then getting divorced. But after my divorce, shortly after my divorce, there was this sudden, although I was like broken, really broken, and really, we were together from our 20s and we were good friends. There was this freedom. I was like, I'm bloody hell, I'm free. Yeah, that came with it. I think a lot of it does depend on who you are as a person as well.
Yeah, and it's so powerful. And what I hear here as well is learning to use our negative emotions as indicators that something's not right. Because I think we tend to stuff them down. Not saying you did this, but I think it would be easy for people who are experiencing the freedom on the way to work, but aren't really tapping it. They just know they feel better, but they don't really know why. And the dread on the way home, and again, not really putting two and two together. That's when you have the workaholism and you come home and you have 3 glasses of wine to try and make the dread go away because you're actually somewhere you don't want to be. And this is something I did in my life coach training with the Martha Beck training I did, is learning to listen to your body's sensational signals when something isn't right. And when you tune into that, you can go, hang on a minute, I'm doing something that goes against my higher self, my soul, whatever you want to call it. I'm doing something massively out of alignment here. What is it I'm doing? And what would I like to be doing instead? And I think this is such a powerful thing, because then you can start to be more discerning when you, let's say, it's me, like, I'm not going to meet anybody. When you meet somebody, you can be more discerning. Am I doing this? Does this feel good? Or am I doing this to try and shut something up, or shut something down, or fill a void? Or is this genuinely the right thing for me? And it's so powerful to be able to tune into our emotional signals, and rather than be frightened by them or overwhelmed by them, because they can be uncomfortable, think, I've got some strange kind of anxiety or worry coming up, and it's come up because of this circumstance that I'm thinking about or I'm in. What does that mean? And what can I do instead?
Well, I tell you one thing that I think is very, very important, and this is now quite scientifically based as well, with the works of people like, Bruce Shipton. I got that
Lipton,
right?
Bruce Lipton. Yeah.
Lipton, when we're talking about the science of belief
Yep.
and neuroscience and epigenetics, and then we
Yep.
go on to the works of Vessel, I forgot his name now.
Bessel van der Kolk.
That's it. Body keeps a score and all of that.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw it so evident in the people that were diagnosed with cancer. The
Yep.
first thing a lot of them said was they were not living their lives according to what they really wanted. And whether we like to admit it or not, the stress and the anxiety and the unhappiness that we hold in our body needs to come out in
Yep.
a way.
Yep.
And often it comes out in an illness. And so I'm not saying everybody that has cancer or is diagnosed with cancer is because of that, but a lot of them that have been will openly admit and say, I'm done with that. I'm not doing that again. That is what has hurt me. That is what has caused it. Now, that's what they say. And so if we look at it from that perspective, keeping ourselves in unhappy marriages or relationship, bouncing from one relationship to the other, not being able to be on our own, all of that is masking something deeper. And if you're masking something that's deep inside you, somewhere along the line, it needs to come out.
Yeah.
And that is why I'm so passionate about saying to people, wake up. Is this really what you want? And that's why the last part of my book is exactly answering that question. When we've gone through this journey and gone, okay, this is what happened. This is how I got there. Now, what do I want? We can be more aware and more honest with ourselves, because let's face it, okay, as a Buddhist, I believe we do come back in our lives and we have to relive them. But say you're not that, and, let's put it, we do still only have this one precious life, right? So, and that is the only thing that's precious, actually, life, nothing else.
Yeah.
So can we really afford to keep living our lives without really exploring what we want and who we are at our deepest core?
Just profound. And I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's why I do the work I do, because I think from my own experience of I lost my stepmom in 2 years ago now, it was a big wake up call for me. Tomorrow isn't guaranteed, but
No.
I realized I'd been going through my life. I'm a reformed workaholic. I'd been putting everything into my business and working like a maniac because I was kind of seeking external validation. And then I'd missed out on so much time, and I realized, shit, actually I could be doing all this. And I'd been putting off visiting my family because I thought, there'll be time, I'll do it another time. And when we actually come back to what you've said, which is we have this one life, it is precious, and we have to get clear on what it is we want and go and do that, rather than sitting and thinking, ugh, I don't enjoy this relationship now, but I'll just thug it out until, I don't know, maybe I'll leave when the kids have left home or what have you. Actually, if it's not working and it's making you unhappy, now is the time to make the change. It's wonderful that you quoted Bessel van der Kolk, because I've read his book and I've also read Gabor Mate's When the Body Says No.
Another one.
It's a brilliant book, anybody, if you're listening to that. And they have actually they did surveys of people who had breast cancer, and they started to ask these women about their emotional lives. And he said in the book that the nurses would be able to, well, they had people who were coming in and they were coming in for biopsies and coming in for diagnostic tests. And the nurses would be able to tell and predict whose was going to come back cancerous, because the women that were coming in, they'd put everybody else first. They put themselves last. They shoved their needs to the bottom of the cupboard. They were the ones that ended up being diagnosed with breast cancer, because it's like this, a lot of the suppression of your own needs, the suppression of your own feelings is making people ill.
Let me just add one thing though.
Yes.
And that is a message also to men, because, the highest proportion of suicides are young men. And so this isn't a woman issue. This is a man and a woman issue. And we need to really readdress how we see relationships and how we see being alone and living our life a lot more meaningful.
Yeah, I think that's it. I think it's taking away the striving for what you don't have is exhausting, and it takes up a huge amount of time. If you're able to come back to that self-acceptance piece, if you're able to sit and say in the moment, okay, maybe you are lonely, maybe you would like to meet somebody, but where you are right now is you're on your own. What do you have to be grateful for right now? What's good right now? And if you can shift your focus to that, we shift our focus inwardly again, which is what we've been talking about. And it's a huge bit of inner growth work, is sitting with yourself and saying, how am I okay right now? What can I enjoy right now? And then you kind of come to a space eventually of peace with yourself. And like you've said, that is when you are more likely to meet somebody, is when you get to a point where you're actually completely okay on your own. It was so funny for me when I reached the point of thinking, actually, I'm starting to enjoy living on my own. Actually, this is quite good. Then I met my husband, my now husband. So I'm not saying it's going to, that's the magic pill for it, but if you can get to that space of being happy as you are right now, it's a game changer, an absolute game changer.
It is. And also being realistic. And this is something that I really like to highlight to people. I was in a marriage for 30 years and then I was in a very short relationship afterwards. And the reality of it all is, most nights it was just sitting on the TV with somebody next to me. It was no different than now. Now I might sit and watch something on the TV and I might be on my own. What difference does it make? I'm still doing the same thing. So let's not over romanticize relationships, because that's not really the reality. Yeah. So let's be honest with that as well.
Yeah.
I think that to me is really important, because when I talk to people that are, thinking about ending their marriages or have walked away, and they look at it, the reality of it is a lot of times they weren't happy. So let's not kind of go, oh, so-and-so is in a relationship, so the world is great. No, it's not true.
Yeah. Yeah. On that note, I'll wrap us up. Anna, thank you for joining me today. Where can folks find you online, and where can people get hold of a copy of your book?
Okay, so my name, Anna Zannides, on Amazon, it comes up. So my book is on Amazon, How Did I Get Here? my website, annazannides.com, and I'm on most of social media.
Brilliant. I'm going to pop your links to your book on Amazon and your website and your socials in the show notes. So for anybody listening, if you want to go and connect with Anna, you can go and find her there. Anna, thank you again for being with me. This has been a really, really great podcast episode.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining us, folks. I hope you've enjoyed today's episode. I will see you same time next week. Bye for now. Thank you for listening to today's episode. If you've enjoyed it, please leave me a 5-star rating and a review, and make sure you share this episode with a friend who you know will also enjoy it. I'd love to connect with you on Instagram. Please drop me a DM and say hi at Emma O'Brien Coach. And for more information about coaching with me, please head to my website, which is emmaobrien.coach.com.